Welcome to a new episode of Outside the Panels with your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes.
Everyone, to an episode of Outside the Panels. This has been a busy week for me. I am running out of t-shirts. No, I do not have that many Dolphins tops. All right, this time around, we're talking to a guy who I think is turning things a little bit around a little bit. So many times we see comics get turned into movies, or we get comics turned into TV shows. For once, we're going the other way, with a horror film genre specialist taking on board his first graphic novel, Mr. Josh Ruben.
Hello. What's up, Johnny? How you doing?
I'm very well, sir. How are you?
Very, very well. Thank you. I'm relaxed. I'm wearing my cool coat. I'm feeling important. Powerful.
Feeling powerful. Yeah. Just you, me, and I, right?
That's right.
Excellent.
Me and my cat.
Yeah, oh, great. What's your cat called?
Ruby. She's a plushy girl, a ploofy girl.
Oh, okay. I have a cat called Nokia.
Oh my gosh, that's a great name.
It's a cell phone over here. So there's a long, boring story she's a rescue cat, and she was rescued from a vet. Someone had tied her to the vet's door handle with a phone charger.
Oh my God. Well, she's in a better place now with you guys.
Yeah. So we gave her PTSD by calling her Nokia. It just felt odd calling Samsung. Samsung, puss.
Samsung, come here. Daewoo.
Excellent. Enough humor. So, tell us about your book. It's coming out the 31st of May worldwide after a hugely successful Kickstarter where you've absolutely smashed your target. So, What's happening? When's this book coming out? What's it about? Please.
Darla comes out May 31st, 2023. Thank goodness, this year, just over a month away. And it's about an irritable small town woman who, after a vicious factory accident, starts fantasizing about some monster in her house who tells her to do sort of wicked things. So it's very Stephen King inspired, a lot of Dead Zone inspo, a little bit of Babadook. And Requiem for a Dream, and a lot of HBO's Tales from the Crypt. That's probably what I devoured most as a kid and left the most impact on my morbid brain.
Has horror always been your go-to choice when it comes to genres?
I'm known more for comedy, but it was horror first. Yeah, I had my sister to thank for that. She invited me into her room when I was a kid, far too young to watch Friday the 13th movies and Freddy's Nightmares and the like. But I did. They were always on cable at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday or whatever. And so that's what I watched and what I first loved before discovering, Robin Williams and all the comedy stuff that made me love comedy. But it was horror first.
Horror first. Do you think, an interesting question, do you think that there's a correlation between horror and comedy?
Oh, yeah. The setup, knockdown formula of the jump scare versus the laugh, the unexpected nature of it, the asymmetrical, unexpected punchline. You check the cupboards or check behind the doors 3 times and you're safe, only for the 4th time for something to jump out at you. Whereas like the first 2 times you don't expect there to be something funny. And then the 3rd time, rule of 3s. Oh my goodness, you're knocked on your ass. So yeah, there's a similar formula for sure.
So, I mean, when we talk about horror and I suppose comedy kind of merging together, you can't help but think of like Sam Raimi, for example.
Yeah.
A master of kind of, you're going down the setup and you don't know which way you're going, right?
That's right.
So how hard is it? Because I'm not a huge horror fan. Not because I get scared or I'm like, oh. It's just, look at me. Look at my grey hair. I've been around, all right? So when the door creaks open and then the door creaks back, I'm like, yeah, there's a guy behind there. And sure enough, there's a guy behind there. I'm like, you know what I'm saying? It's hard to give me the shock. That said, there are some ones that absolutely still get me. How hard is it then? Because in horror, especially if you've got that jump cut, how hard is it to do that in comic books? Because horror's got like the music playing and the atmosphere and You know, comics doesn't
Yeah,
have that.
I mean, comic books have a similar thing. Let's say there's a certain amount of, and this is sort of new to me, but it's something that as a comic fan, which I was very early on as well, right around when I discovered the likes of Freddy and Jason and everything else. Comic books have a similar kind of setup, knockdown, payoff, where your panels are a certain way. There's a certain number of panels. Life is fine. Life is normal. The proverbial open the door type moment, and then that following 2 pages, the next 2 pages, if not one full panel on the left, one full page on the left, is the entirety of what's behind the door. The man coming through the door, the thing coming through the door, the big reveal, the big scare. And I learned a lot about that with my partners from Invader on Darla, which was, you're going to need these kind of beats that feel like almost chapter breaks.
Yeah,
you need to pace your imagery so that the full page reveal of a nightmare, or the reveal of Darla's monster, as we call it, is impactful as it can be, as opposed to anticipating it from your reading left to right. That on the right page you catch that glimpse. You don't want to give yourself away. So that's a big piece of it.
Yeah, you know what? That's an absolute great observation to make. The fact you've got to time your page on the turn. That's the moment where you kind of, that's probably your only chance to give that jump scare, isn't it?
That's right.
Because you like whip it across.
That's
if
right.
you're going into like a double spread, then fair enough. That sort of gives it the wow factor.
Right.
So making films, we're going to come back to comic fans in a little bit. Making films, how the process is, I'm not going to say too dissimilar, but I mean, in making films, you've got actors, you've got lighting, you've got music, you've got whatever going on. Comics, there's the artist, there's the inker, there's the colorist. So that sense of collaboration, that must be pretty ingrained in you as a filmmaker.
It is,
to enjoy that work rather than coming to comic books a bit fresh and think, I want to do it all.
Yeah. I mean, that was, I came from the world of doing it all anyway. I came up and doing internet videos where you had to do it all and you had no choice and no one was going to help you but your crew of 5. But it's all collaboration.
I should do something about internet videos. I maybe get into that somewhere along the line. Maybe have a talk show or something. I don't know.
Something. I mean, because even if it is a talk show where it's just you, there's a camera person, camera people, there are production designers, there are wardrobe people. It's a collaboration. You're constantly fielding questions and answering questions and problem solving and troubleshooting. And with comics, the similarity is that you're making pictures, number one. So it's not unlike film. You're creating images, you're creating tableaus that are supposed to elicit some feeling, make people feel a certain way. There were certain moments where I tighten up an image a bit to make a moment more emotionally impactful. Let's go closer, more visceral on Darla's eyes. Let's widen out to see how lonely she is, that sort of thing. It's all creating pictures, and the collaboration of it all, it's like no different than working with, say, a stunt person or really any department head. You want to give them a certain amount of freedom so they have skin in the game. Brianna Tippett didn't make $100,000 to hand draw these 150 some odd pages. She made far less. She did it for the joy and for the excitement of, theoretically the excitement of working with me. And so I rather than like micromanaging her, I said, you have skin in the game. Like, why don't you draw it the way you want to draw it? And then I'll adjust. Like, draw it the way that excites you. And I would guide her along the way that you got to mold a great performance. Let me see how you're going to act this thing out. Now let me mold it a little bit so that you don't get caught, trying.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of people get caught in the moment, don't they? They're like, if she's anything like me, and I've got to say right now that I'm just an amateur, wholehearted amateur. When I draw something, I'm there, and then I'll go back in, ink it, and then once I've inked it, I'll ink it again, and then and by the time I finish, the whole thing's black. I'm like, I went too far there. So I'm kind of like,
that's probably how I would be.
You probably get caught. You get caught in the moment, don't you? You just get caught in the
yeah.
While we're talking about the art, good time to show some stuff. There we go. I'm going to admit, I'm going to be honest. When I heard that Darla, I was thinking, you know, the old MTV cartoon. Do you remember?
Oh, Daria.
Daria, that's it. That's what I was thinking.
Daria,
I was like, oh, Daria's grown up. Excellent. I know what's going
yeah. This is Daria's grandmother, Darla.
It's interesting. The art style. You've talked about Stephen King. You've talked about the Babadook, and if I've said that wrong, I probably have.
It's a weird word. It's all good.
Babadook. There he is.
Yeah.
I'll get it. My wife's seen the movie. She loves. See, this is the problem I've got. My wife and my daughter love horror. Me, I'm like, you know, I get confused. I get confused. Why they jump? Because the music changes. I'm like, you know that, but never mind. So everything seems quite peaceful here. You know, the colors look nice and, you know, watercolory. It's just a true effect going on. And then this bottom panel. I think this bottom panel is just the one, isn't it? This is the kind of, is this the start of everything going on there? Or is this halfway through the story?
About halfway, a little less than halfway. This is the first kind of full-blown nightmare that Darla has, where you see, is this her psyche? Is this something that she's imagining? And there's a bit of an emotional punch to it, because, you know, she's seeing the face of her estranged daughter she hasn't seen in many years, not since she ran away from home, which happens in the pages following. But this was all Brianna. This was Brianna's interpretation, my artist's interpretation of this dream. I think I described something of a red landscape in the script, but nothing about the shadow of trees crawling across the wall. That is just so brilliant. And the way she sort of laid out the images, you know, the close up on her eyes as she's falling asleep in that kind of mini panel before getting into the rest of it. It's just, just nothing I ever really would have thought of.
What sort of writer are you when it comes to comic books? Because you'll have heard of the Marvel method. For sure.
I have, and I have Scott McCloud's book, which criminally I'm, you know, crawling my way through and did not read before. Yeah, and that was a recommendation from Mike Perkins and Kevin Miller at Invader. Horribly. I mean, I did it horribly, because my process of writing and approaching comics was, I can write plays, I can write screenplays, I can write prose, but it's a completely different medium. It's fully visual. And so the first pass of the script was riddled, as I say, choked with dialogue, choked with dialogue bubbles. So it was almost as if like a novelist might as well have come in and just said, now you're going to write a picture book. But a novelist would go, yeah, but where's all the prose? So there's the description of the images in traditional comic writing with a bit of dialogue. Or in my instance, it was giving Brianna a script and going, can we adapt this? And what can I do to adapt this? And let me kind of walk you through some of the images, but, you know, let me see your translation. So it's a way that I will not be doing and approaching for sure.
Lesson learned.
Yeah, lesson indeed learned. Because, I mean, it's, you know, ultimately the labor for poor Brianna, it was like we give it to Invader and they're going like, dude, you have to let these images wash over you. You have to you have to feel the story. You can't feel the story with a bunch of bubbles and text.
Yeah. You're right. You're absolutely right. Because you're in that, again, it's different strokes for different folks, practically.
Yeah.
You know, you can, a book, like a prose, like a novel, you have to really give the images some description.
Yeah.
You know, just so that the mind can kick in, right?
Yeah. That's right.
So, you know, you can't just say, you know, Darla walks in and then falls asleep. That doesn't work.
That's right. That's right.
But do the whole like Darla was exhausted from a hard day and then just build on from there, right?
Yeah.
The image can convey so much of that. Straight away.
That's right. That's right. I'm learning quite a bit of that. And part of the process of getting to Darla was I did approach Invader with a more traditional comic book story. And then once they were sort of gradually coaching me through what's called an ash can through the preview comic, it was really just 5-10 pages. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't figure out how to do it. It would always be too much dialogue, too much description, too many panels. Ultimately, I'd write 14 pages, you know, whatever. So it's such a learning process, but it's a great exercise in minimalist writing and minimalism. I may even, for my own method, start to storyboard, just get images from movies and put them together, and then just write, dialogue description, etc., beneath them, and just kind of try that way, just because that's how I can best wrap my brain around it as a preview comic and in actual imagery.
So working in movies, you have to be quite visual.
Yeah.
Because you've got to see you've got to see it and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So when you're handing off the art, even with good direction, is there a moment in your chest where you're like, what's going to happen? And then kind of, the relief when you get the fantastic work back? Or is it a kind of, I don't know, how do you control your need, I would assume, to be the artistic force when you have an artist already there?
Well, I don't know how helpful this analogy is, but I worked with Kevin Bacon, very famous actor. Who's
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him.
Never.
Truly, like the six, he's done so many movies that he's the degree guy, Yeah, no, of course you are, because everybody knows him. He's the most famous actor, arguably.
Wild Things.
Yes. And I worked with him on a podcast series. So I directed the entirety of this podcast series where he was the star. And we had a phone call, as you do with every artist, I do it with every actor before I work with them. I say, how do you like to be directed? How do you like to be talked to? How do you like to work? Everybody's different. And they really appreciate it. I'm an actor first, before I got into filmmaking. And he said, well, normally I do all my homework before I get to set so that I could just work, and you don't need to micromanage or tell me much of anything unless there's some major direction that needs to come across. He said, but I've never done a podcast before, and so I'm here to learn. I'm here to just dive in and figure the thing out. In the case of the comic, you have to be there to dive in and figure it out and give yourself over to, in this case, in a way, the director was Brianna. Brianna was really the visual artist, the director of photography, who is going to say, great, I love this story. Now let me run it through my grinder, and then I'll hand it to you. And then you tell me, just per your taste, as a film lover and a comic book lover too. I love comics and have for many years. What you think? Does this art convey your story and the emotionality of it well? And so you have to be willing to temper what control and micromanagerial issues you have going into a new medium. Otherwise, you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, it's like with anybody, any great artist. You want to be able to, your art is only as good as the people you surround yourself with. In this case, my army was more or less Brianna. She did the ink, she hand drew everything, she did the lettering, everything. But without Invader, we wouldn't have gone this far. Without Melissa, our PR person, we would have gone this far. Daniel Crozier, who did our alt cover art for the Kickstarter. It's an army.
This is good. Melissa rocks.
She's great, yeah.
She's great. Right, time for a quick break for one of our other shows. We're going to get into it after the break, but you said you're a comic book fan previously. What sort of stuff were you reading back then when you got into comics?
Batman Year 2, Batman Full Circle, Batman Night of the Demon, greatest stories ever told, The Joker, Venom, Lethal Protector.
Venom.
Yeah, oh man, love it. I love it. Even the Jurassic Park comic books that were limited edition.
Cool. So lots of bats in there. All right then. So you mentioned the bats. It's time for then probably the longest advert we have. It is the Definitive Crusades. the film Crusade for everything that is DC comic orientated. There you go. I like how everyone's got really posh photos, and there's me just with my headset on. Great.
I know. Wow. I feel like I was in a Maxwell commercial, just my head blown off.
It works all right, doesn't it? It's fine. You're the expert. It works fine, right?
Yeah, it works great.
We looked at a page prior to the break. Image-wise, there you go. This is kind of the one you were talking about. This is the second page where the dream escalates and the estranged daughter is coming into this. The dreamscape, really surreal, really dark. It's not. Most people tend to go for something that's vaguely familiar. You've kind of went, I think I'll go over here instead. Was that was that kind of the choice because you want the art and the story to stand out more? Keep the reader on the feet, on the toes?
The story was always about this obscure, unusual, and ethereal. It was really Brianna's brilliant artistry that took it the rest of the way in that kind of that rally race. You know, she took the torch and she ran with it. She took my kind of weirdo words. So this was as much of a surprise to me reading it. I was as blown away as I hope readers will be by the imagery, seeing it come to life, because I otherwise would have had to do this on set someday if I was lucky enough to make the movie. So this really took me by surprise.
In a good way, right?
In the best way.
In the best way. It's absolutely so evocative. I mean, the same red's a danger color for a lot of people, right? And you haven't shied away from that. You've kind of put it front and center, you know. So even if you're looking at this, you're thinking red, you're either thinking danger or you're thinking stop. You know, you kind of want the character. You know something's going to go wrong because of that. Like, whoa, you know. So however you look or interpret red, you know it's a transient color. I always think something's going to happen. Maybe I'm reading too much into my color scheme. Who knows? Who knows?
I think it's bang on. I think any theory is bang on. I also just realizing, looking at this image again, how brilliantly Brianna composed the blacks. That the black of her hair at the top is sort of a complete match to the monster reveal at the end. Her hair, the hair might as well. It's as if the monster was there the entire time. It's entirely her id's doing. You know, I think that's just so brilliant.
I think that's really evocative towards the bottom of the panel, where the black tends to. It looks as if it almost bleeds into the border a little bit, doesn't it? Yeah. Really, really good shout. Really good call. Really good call. You mentioned Stephen King. You mentioned HBO's show.
Tales from the Crypt. Yeah.
Tales from the Crypt. Those two are quite different. I mean, Stephen King can go for like the clever horror. I remember watching. I know it's not Stephen King, but I remember the first Paranormal Activity, and I wasn't fussed by it at all until the final scene. Yeah. And then when it comes to horror, I don't like poltergeisty things. That's probably the one that's going to get me, right? So I'm lying in bed 3 nights later, and my foot's dangling off the bed. I'm thinking, I'm going to cover it up right now. So Stephen King has that kind of that cleverness a little bit. Tales from the Crypt sometimes went. Well, they didn't maybe go for the full shock. It went for the kind of horror, kind of not. Those are two kind of distinct polar opposites, in my opinion. Of course, you're the expert. How do you kind of then merge those two to get to something more cohesive?
Well, the Stephen King that I grew up with was more, I want to say broad. I grew up on Creepshow Stephen King, on Stephen King's Cat's Eye, on episodes of television that he would write, like the one he did for X-Files. And there was one that I think he did do one, if not more, for Tales from the Crypt. The King that I knew was, at least in the television translation of his work, was a bit more cheesy. It was a bit almost kind of horror comedy. It was sort of an assault on the senses. It was eerie, unusual. Even Pet Sematary was like kind of blackly comic in a way. So that was the Stephen King I grew up with. I didn't grow up on Andy Machete's It. or the current King interpretations of it, the boogeyman. It's getting slower, it's getting darker. Back then, it was a bit cornier, and that's actually what I responded to, and was what's super impactful to me as a kid. So as far as this character is concerned, Darla kind of reminds me of, or is evocative of, almost those EC comic type flawed protagonists.
Oh, EC, man, what a good shout! Love me some EC comics.
I didn't realize that was what I was culling from, but I didn't read a ton of EC as a kid. I did read a lot of Tales from the Crypt books, and that was obviously EC or EC inspired. That was the world. These were these flawed kind of anti-hero, moral gray line type characters, and I think that was a big inspiration for me. So it sort of all overlaps. Babadook, but when the Babadook of it all gets into the kind of plot line monster in the house, devolution into madness, and Requiem for a Dream with the kind of similar devolution into madness for Ellen Burstyn's character and the like.
It's interesting to talk about EC. I remember, I don't know if you know this, but over here in the UK, Marvel brought out weekly comics. All right, so it's like Star Wars, for example. You get like a weekly comic. You get the American version broke down into like 4 or 5 pages. All right, and in the back of it, you get things like Tales to Astonish or Tales of Suspense. You kind of like the astronaut, the clever astronaut that thinks he's brilliant, flying jets off into space, and then lands on the planet and finds out he's just as brainy as a pet monkey to this other. And like that's, as a kid growing up, that's the horror that I used to think, oh my God, that's really scary. Or people who drill down into the earth and think they're like, oh, brilliant, because we're moving away from society, and then they find some light and they realize they're surrounded by monsters. That sort of horror when I was a kid used to really, in fact, now that's when I see the Star Wars weekly comics at Marts and comic conventions and stuff. I'm buying them not for the Star Wars stuff. I'm buying them for the other stuff, just because it's like
creepy stuff in the back. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's challenging in a way. Horror can challenge, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not. Oh yeah. It's challenging your fears, and when I say fears, I don't mean like, oh my God, I'm scared of spiders. I'm thinking about those more ethereal fears that kind of sit in the corner of your mind until the quiet corners of night kick around, and then that's when they start. Very much like Darla's page there. Am I making sense?
That's exactly right. I mean, it's like reading one of those more like a Caitlin Kiernan or a Nathan Ballengrid short story. There's like really obscure, liminal, unusual horrors about the cellar or about a feeling you get or about the dark corner of the wall or what have you. Something being in the house when no one else can see it and everybody thinks you're crazy. And yet this human element that exists through all of it, it's just kind of gets under your skin in a different way than just, Pumpkinhead or whatever. And I love Pumpkinhead.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about horror as if there's one aspect, that's absolute balderdash. Science fiction covers everything from Star Wars all the way to 2001: A Space Odyssey and everything in between, right? So you get like the cheesy space fantasy stuff as well as the serious version. Same with horror. Horror can cover you from cheese on toast all the way up to the first Nightmare on Elm Street, which was really, really scary back then.
Yeah. That's right.
I think Freddy probably lost out through repetition.
Repetition, I mean, again, the Freddy that I first saw was a cartoon character. It was Dream Warriors. I didn't see the first one first. It was to me, it was Bugs Bunny. He was horror Bugs Bunny. That's why I love horror so much, and why I'm probably going to be less inclined to make Hostel 2 or Hostel 4 or Saw 25 or whatever it is, as opposed to something more maybe unusual, obscure, or fun. I think I'm probably a little more Tremors leaning than anything.
Tremors, the Kevin Bacon movie.
Yeah. Hey, there you go, Kevin. He comes back. There goes that degree.
We're always 7 seconds away from Kevin Bacon. Love Tremors a lot. Following on with the art, the next page along, we can see now that the hair is morphed even more. There is now a true bleed from the borders into the creature. What does that signify? Where there's a black border, is that where the monster always lives?
I think from what I can recall, I know Brianna did some of this originally, but Mike Perkins at Invader was the one to say, and this is a learning lesson for me again, as someone who's entering into this new visual medium. He goes, get clever with, have fun with the borders of your comic.
Agreed.
Have them get jagged and bleed, and you're more justified than ever with Darla, with this book about someone who's sort of losing it, to do such a thing, to have reality around her bleed and fray, because she's losing it. So you have every justification. I just love that really freed up my brain.
That's really good. It's really good. I like how the borders work so well. Good shout. Right, we saw earlier we can follow you on Instagram.
Yes, sir.
It's right there. Dead simple. Right there. You have your own website. So there it is. josh'smindhouse.com. In fact, we'll do a quick, where is it at? Stop that. Show this. I've got it ready to go. It's like I'm ready. It's like I know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing at all.
You've done this before.
Yeah, it's not my first rodeo, as they say. Boom! There you go.
Hey, that's the 2 stars in my next movie.
Cool. There you go.
There's a little Darla. I should probably change that. It's not live on Kickstarter anymore. We're done.
Yep.
Little werewolves within action. Got a little rotation. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Cool.
It's a fancy site, folks.
That's an interesting image. I love
Isn't that cool? That was a serial killer movie I did. It's a vampire flick I did last year. Went to Fantastic Fest. It was a good one.
Is that her from She-Hulk?
Yeah, that's right. Tatiana Maslany and Orphan Black. And Jasmine Savoy Brown on the right. She's in Scream and Yellow Jackets. She's having a real moment right now.
What's it like having like so many sort of stars around? Do you get chuffed when they get really good reviews on things like She-Hulk and Orphan Black?
I do. When any of my friends do well, I just light up. I want to be as supportive as any friend would be too. If my buddy worked at H&R Block and got a raise, it doesn't matter if they're a movie star or they're in a cool TV show or what. But it's just I'm a proud buddy. Yeah,
but that means they're going to charge you more when you want them in your movie.
That's right.
You're like
well, they got to do it for free because I'm such a good fan.
Yeah. Wait, well done. Damn it, I've got to pay through the nose now. And of course, finally, if you want even more information, check out invadercomics.com for all the news from everything that Invader does, and of course, all the up-to-date Darla news. There you go. Josh, I know you're on a time scale, so I think that pretty much sums us up. Well done. I am absolutely so pleased for you. The book looks great from what I've seen.
Thank you.
I love the ideas behind it. Some sort of PTSD, some emotional trauma, driving stuff. Really like that. There's a lot going on. So don't forget to check out UCPM for all your favorite shows. You saw the advert for TDC earlier. Of course, if you like Marvel, like Josh does, then look at No Prize Podcast for everything Marvel, MCU, and Disney Plus. Guaranteed they will talk about Mandalorian and the season finale. No comment just yet. Josh, you have been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it.
All right, and that's it for another show. I've been your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes. As always, adios.